Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And in the last few days I've actually been thinking a little bit about the forward operation basis from the pirates. I think it's pretty interesting, especially if I understand the EVE Vegas talk about it correctly. It's something that will be a little bit more tricky to find because you'll need combat probe scanners in order to scan them down. And if it's left unattended, then the pirates are going to start to send patrols through the system. Eventually they'll even attack players with bad standings and even attack structures, perhaps even inactive ones, maybe even active ones. So it's really cool that if CCP can make this work, we'll have this sort of escalating content in a system if the players don't maintain it and protect it from the pirates. Now, of course, what I'm personally hoping for and seeing in the future then is that we could have the same thing for the empires and for all pirate factions, even for the sleepers as well, and for the Sandshaft, for instance, incorporate all of that into the existing content, like the incursions. And then you can have this constant tug of war between all these different NPC factions where you as a player can make a difference. If, for instance, at some point you want to make a high-sec system unsafe for high-seekers and you want to help those pirates, you could have means to do that. But at the same time, if you want to make low-sec systems safer for high-sec players, you could help the empires with their forward operating bases there, and thus create this tug of war where your actions actually influence and help out the NPCs, and so that you don't need the full commitment of, alright, we're gonna take over a low-sec system and try to make it safe, but no, we're gonna help the NPCs and try to create something cool that way. So yeah, I think that actually is the type of content that I'm most excited for when it comes to the expansion. I do wonder what kind of ships we'll have to get ready, both for these forward operating bases and for the resource wars. So there's still lots of preparations to do and lots of things we'll need to find out once it actually hits. Next up, let's get started on the market. Of course, that's why everyone is here. So as always, we are going to start with plex. It's going to be at 235. There we go. And plex, I am a little bit surprised by that because I do see lots of sales happening at the moment, like sub for a month, get a plex free, things like that, or 500 plex free right now. But it's still at 3,184,000 ISK, which is up a little bit from last week. So that is quite interesting. We can see that plex is now hovering above the 3 million ISK. It's finding it very difficult to go below 3 million ISK. It did so a couple of times, but obviously something happened here to create this decrease in price, which was in all likeliness a sale. And now we have a slight increase in volumes as well, but we also have an increase in price. So plex slowly going back up, and CCP trying to stall the motion, I think, a little bit with a plex sale, although that may not even really be intended. They're just having a plex sale, but it's not really having that big of an impact on the plex prices just yet. Let's take a look at the multiple pilot trade certificate. That one is heading to above 1.5 billion. That's very unusual. Sellers are at 1.5 billion and another 56 million ISK. Okay, that's actually really expensive. First one coming in, 46 of them, and the buyers are at 1.455 billion ISK. So why is this so unusual? Because it basically makes these much more expensive than converting one from plex normally. So perhaps someone can do all the detailed calculations and see if those sellers are just trying to eke out a nice profit, and if you could try to short circuit those by converting some of your plex into these multiple pilot trading certificates. One thing to note, of course, is that the volumes, we're talking like 20 of them, 20 to 30 of them that are being sold every day. It's definitely possible as well. Let's take a quick look at the at the average price being above 1.5 billion. There is people that are purchasing those from the sellers as well. So perhaps some competition could be put there if the information that I got is correct, that a conversion from plex to multiple pilot trading certificate should actually mean that the plex are more expensive than these certificates. It is also possible that basically if this is an indication that plex was bound to go much higher and that CCP just basically kept this under control with their plex sale. That's a possibility as well. So that could be quite interesting if that was actually what was happening, that we would have a final run up of the price before the expansion, and that it's actually a plex sale that has stopped that from happening. We'll have to see in the upcoming 10 days. That's basically what we've got left until the expansion hits. I'm pretty curious to see about all the changes there. Next up, let's go for the skill extractor. That could be another indication. Yeah, skill extractor is actually breaking out a little bit more than plex on the chart, at least going above 350 million. So this again is an indication that a serious increase in price was in the books for plex, but that the sale has basically stalled that. So skill extractor selling for 367.5 million ISK, pretty damn expensive, and 347 million ISK for the buyers of skill extractors. As you can see here, up a little bit, also being stalled at the end, of course, by what's happening with plex, I think. Next up, the large skill injectors. Those are going up in price, reaching the level of a 1-year high again for the second time here, well above 800 million ISK at this point. And I actually don't have the filters up. I do have the filters up, so all of this was only in Jita. Let's go over them quickly after this one. So large skill injectors selling for 824 million ISK, and the buyer are at 809 million ISK. So these have definitely been forced up to more than 800. So I think here a very strong possibility is that we're seeing strong demand for skill points because of the announced alpha clone changes, which will then get access to cross-faction training, battle cruisers and battleships, more Tech 2 weapons for small and medium ships. So it's definitely a pretty large skill point pool that they'll get access to, which I think will give them a much better, more rounded experience in EVE Online. It also does mean that they'll become more efficient at creating ISK. When it comes to the resources, not so much, which, well, from my perspective, might actually be an okay situation. But yeah, CCP does need to be careful when it comes to that balance. It does probably also mean a big demand for skill points, which we're now seeing translated in the large skill injectors being at their 1-year high price point, again well above 800 million, and apparently staying there, which is another good point that this might become your investments of the future on any pullback. If you buy a couple of these skill injectors, at some point it's either going to be plex or skill point demand that's going to go up again due to a change in the game, and as a result, there we go, you're getting some profit out of that. Let's quickly touch on the prices in the player-owned trade hubs of plex. Plex selling for, actually, yeah, that's quite a dip down. So that's interesting. 3,126,027 ISK for the sellers. If we go in station, 3,183,000, well, it's not that big of a difference. All right, so it's okay. It's not as big as I thought, and when it comes to the buyers, yeah, it's actually very close to that at 3,076,000 ISK. Well above 3 million though. That is something to note here. But the sellers inside the player-owned trade hub, especially in perimeter, are closing that gap even more. Then we had the training certificates. Again, yeah, 1,556,000, exactly right on the money here. One sell order in perimeter competing with the sell orders in Jita. So here the filter didn't make that much of a difference. And then the skill extractors, 351 million ISK, and in station they were 368.5. That is a significant difference here. Which again, let's see if lots of these are pretty recent here, as you can see. In the last 24 hours. I think I still saw the sale a couple days ago as well. They're going down from like 360 and up down to 351.3 million. So here again, I think that basically an increase in price was in the cards, but that the plex sale has caused that to stall, But as a result, most of the more active players that are jumping on that opportunity are actually trying to do so in the perimeter trade hubs, which means that here there's a pretty big gap from 368.5 million in Jita Station, and it goes down to 351.3 million in the player-owned trade hubs. That's quite a big difference, and I think that's basically something that Jita Station itself needs a little bit of time for that price to go back down. When it comes to the buyers, well, the best buyer is actually in Jita Station here at 347, so they're faster to respond on the buy order side of things, which is a little bit weird. Why would you put up your buy order in Station where you're paying more taxes rather than in the trades hub? Perhaps if it's what you're looking for is absolute safety, but other than that, there's really hardly any reason to still do that for some goods, especially for Plex related stuff. So interesting look back here actually at the difference between Jita Station and the player owned trade hubs. Then all we have left here are the skill injectors, as we saw, up in price quite substantially, 824 million in the trade hubs, but also 824, first one coming in here in the station. And then, well, actually here, look at that, it's a very recent response to what's happening in the player-owned trade hub, because it's 850 million for the sellers of large skill injectors in Jita itself, except for that one order that is now competing with the perimeter trade hub. So that increase in price apparently also going to stall a little bit. Again, probably the impact of the Plex sale that CCP is holding, which is not showing right now a serious turnaround for Plex, like in the 5-day moving average dropping below 3 million or anything like that, but it is probably stalling a much higher increase in price. And then finally we still have the small skill injectors, which are currently selling for 167 million in the player owned trade hubs and 172.8, almost 173 in the Jita Station. Well, that's actually still again a respectable difference between the two, and here we can see this chart is quite a bit newer because it's a new item in the game that's only exists for a couple of months, but up in price substantially, again showing this increased demand for skill points, which personally I think is tied to the changes coming for alpha clones in December. Let's move on to some minerals, to some bad news then. Here is titanium, let's say 1205. Really? 1205? Wow. Okay. Quite a long first segment, but titanium is down in price, and here I think that it's not really good news. 510 by now. When I was checking for the ticker, it was 513, and in the meantime there's another 2 billion units coming in at 511, 510 the next seller. Buyers are at 509. The margin has been completely closed, and it's more supply coming in that's going to continue to drive the price of titanium down. At this point, if you're a smaller seller of titanium, you're of course saying, you know what, 509, I'm taking it, just get rid of my 100 million units of titanium. 508, I'm taking it. And so this price is probably going to be driven down, and the buyers will probably try to pick up more significant amounts at a price well below 5 ISK at that point, because supply just keeps coming in. The chart doesn't look all too good. Our efficiency in titanium is definitely going down, and the culprit is going to be the members of the Imperium, which are at the moment mining up another storm in preparation for their next actions in EVE, which might be like a war on around the moon mining materials. But while a Keepstar has been down at the moment, I would say that the Imperium is back in their own space, mining up a storm and driving the price of minerals down substantially. Next up here we've got pyrite, same story, close to a 1-year low, bouncing off of the 5 ISK mark, but probably gonna stay there for the foreseeable future. And I fully expect at this point, if you're looking at what's happening in titanium, that titanium will be driven to less than 5 ISK at some point. 525 for the sellers of pyrite and 510 for the buyers of pyrite. Again, 200 million here, 100 million here. Buyers are trying to pick up 10 million, 27 million. Nobody's sure how low this is gonna go, and so everybody is just waiting and seeing, especially with really low volumes on the buyer side of things. And that's the name of the game right now. Next up we've got Mixelon. Was under pressure a little bit, but you can again see that disparity between what's happening. Someone mentioned that there's a decent amount of Mixelon coming from the moon mining options as well. with the Tech 2 ores that are being created. There's also some other ores that will always be thrown in the mix, and some people say that it's quite heavy on Mexalon. That could possibly be bad news, but at the moment, of course, the bottleneck in Nullsec must still be Mexalon, and as a result we actually see a little bit of a bounce back from 70 ISK up in price. Sellers are at 75 ISK, buyers at 72.3 ISK here. Decent supply, 129 million, 20 million. It's definitely quite a bit lower than titanium and pyrite. Buyers here coming in at 72.3 with 23 million ISK, and at 72 you also have someone willing to buy 200 million ISK units, of Mexalon. So strong demand here, which is normal. It's the one mineral that I think Nullsec will not be exporting to Jita. When it comes to Isogen, more bad news, of course, breaking to that 50 ISK mark without too much resistance. 49.97 for the sellers, 47.57 for the buyers. Buyers are starting to come in with some decent number here, 62 million, 58 million, but the sellers still coming in with another 37 million units here as well. Competing for that price range, but breaking straight to the 50 ISK Isogen, staying pretty worthless. So at the moment here, yeah, the question is, what do you want to do? And you can clearly see that there are some investors willing to buy Isogen at around 47.5. Personally, what I'm doing, I'm not buying extra minerals, but I'm not selling this stuff. I'm not selling my Isogen, not selling my pyrite for sure. Titanium above 5 ISK, you might still want to get rid of that if you can, but it won't be for very long, I don't think. Let's move on then to Noxium, which yeah, again is taking a really big dive as well, heading for 325 here. Sellers are at 340, buyers at 316. That gap keeps getting bigger because the volumes on the buyers just aren't there anymore. Nobody wants to be the one that is picking up that Noxium at 316 and then watching it plunge to less than 300 at this point. And so the sellers are still coming in with 15 million, another 10 million here, driving those prices down here. Again, we can see what the impact of the Rorcal can be on the mineral market when it's peacetime in Nullsec for those really big groups. And I would say that that's what's happening right now. On the Nullsec mineral fronts, here is Zydrine, that's suffering just as much, going down to less than 1,000 ISK on average a couple of days ago. At the moment selling for, yeah, look at that, 999.94 ISK for the sellers, 970 for the buyers. This is pretty damn cheap Zydrine. So when it comes to the high-sec minerals, I wouldn't be purchasing. When it comes to Zydrine here, you're purchasing Zydrine for less than 1,000 ISK. Look at the entire chart. I think that that's okay, especially since for myself I am planning to also make some stuff for structures. I'll need it. And I'll need some Zydrine as well. So buying some of this I don't think is necessarily a bad idea. And then we'll move on to Megasite, which is stalling its descent. It's holding at less than 1250 though, which makes it in line with what you would consider a normal price compared to Zydrine. I think 1278.96 for the sellers, so 1280 ISK pretty much. That's okay. I would say around average normal price for Megasite. Buyers are at 1185 as well, which is a normal price. I would say that for Megasite, I wouldn't blame you if you're not purchasing at this point, because we saw that Megasite can touch the 1000 price mark as well, but for Zydrine you can just look at the chart and this looks pretty damn promising if you can pick some up on the buy order side of things here. Pretty interesting situation. And then the question is, how long is this gonna keep up? Will, for instance, the expansion and the changes to the moons force the Imperium to go to war, to try to expand or anything like that, and maybe stall their mining? If that doesn't happen though, then of course there is very high chance that the pressure we're seeing across the board will also come to Megasite and might even come to Mexalon as well, driving those prices down to lower price points as well, because those are the ones that still have some room compared to their 1-year lows. But when it comes to Zydrine, we're getting pretty close. Well, actually 900, yeah, 970 for the buyers. Look out for that. Titanium, still has some room to go as well, but Pyrite looking pretty damn bad. Isogen looking really bad as well, and Noxium just straight up racing down there as well. Not a good time for miners at the moment. You're competing with the biggest, most organized group, and when they're focusing on mining, they're getting the most out of it. And here is Morphite finally, related to Tech 2, so that one is hesitating a little bit, but was definitely bumped back down straight to less than 10,000 ISK again. Sellers at 10,200, buyers are at 9,600, which means that people are willing to just dump some Morphite to these buyers as well at less than 10,000 ISK. Of course, knowing where we come from, personally I would like to see buyers at around 8k and sellers at 9k before I jump in for some purchases myself. So we still have a ways to go on a lot of these, but it's pretty obvious that the trend is down for minerals. Moving on to some PI at 2010. There we go. Let's go over these and let's take a look at what they're doing. So construction blocks here, there was this massive dip to less than 11k, which I managed to pick up a couple of them, but just not enough. And now we can see that we bounce back. We're still staying well on pressure on the 20-day moving average. And right now construction blocks are selling for 12,600 and the buyers are 12,400. That looks like a lot. So yeah, we're actually going up here all of a sudden in the chart. If you manage to buy here for less than 11,000 ISK on this dip here, then you might want to look into maybe selling 12,600. I would say that that's above average. 12,400 as well, very low margin. So construction blocks just after just a couple of weeks, I think, maybe 10 days after a nice opportunity, jumping back up to above average. Not at a 1-year high, nowhere near the 14k or anything like that, but definitely a respectable jump back up here all of a sudden. Consumer electronics, basically flat, but at a very good price range, well above average here. Selling for 15,500, buyers are at 14,175. This again, pretty much a no-brainer. If you can make this, or if you have some of these stocks lying around, you can definitely sell these at a really good price. Coolants next. These guys are under pressure. That's quite interesting. Heading for 11k, but not really willing to test that. If we would go below that, we definitely have a buy opportunity. Selling for 12,000 ISK, buyers are at 11,400 ISK. I would say right around average for coolants, and this is probably why fuels are actually a bit cheaper at the moment. So it's under pressure, but it's not willing to dive straight to a clear buy opportunity just yet. Enriched uranium doing a pretty big swing here on the downside as well, 14k. So 14,000 for the sellers, 13,800 for the buyers. It's a pretty big drop, but coming from pretty much a 1-year high point, I would say that we're still a little bit above average. Okay to sell, but you can clearly see that you don't want to dump too big volumes anymore at this point. Otherwise, you're gonna risk really crashing the price. If we break that 12.5k point, or if we play with it on the chart and on the buy order side of things, perhaps we could look at purchasing some of these. If you're also looking at the entire chart here, you could see that 15,000 ISK, 14,000 ISK might actually be your average for enriched uranium. But I think that before this, we were definitely lower, and that 17.5 is a really high price, and that the fact that we've been here for so long indicates that we're actually at a very high demand PI market more than anything else. For enriched uranium here. So 14k and pretty much 14k as well for the buyers of enriched uranium. You could see this as an average price or as slightly above average, and I would look out for an opportunity like this on the chart if you want to purchase some of this stuff. Integrity response drones actually jumping back up in price a little bit, but basically staying above 3 million ISK, showing strong demand with the new refineries coming out. 3.2 million for the sellers, 3 million for the buyers. It's basically some people picking up integrity response drones at 3 million, either as speculation, hoping to make a profit on that when the expansion actually hits, or of course, like myself at this point, people that are waiting for a slightly better price, purchasing a little bit of what they need, expecting to make some of these refineries themselves. which is what I'm doing at the moment. Mechanical parts next, went down to 11k, jumping back up a little bit, selling for 11,900 ISK, buyers are at 11,600 ISK. I would put this at around average. Maybe the sellers are a little bit below that, but it's very close to average for mechanical parts. You could see this as a slight opportunity as well, considering the entire chart, but I would say it's decently risky, considering how steady down coolant has been in the last month and a half. So we don't really know what's gonna happen there. Maybe some extra fuel demand is in the books because of the moon mining activity itself, but this is one thing to note. I think that people will be putting up refineries, like myself as well, but I will just move my refinery operations from the Astrahus to the refinery itself. Normally I'll be able to move over the rig as well, and as a result I'm not going to increase my fuel consumption despite adding a refinery for that reprocessing service. So yeah, fuels maybe up a little bit, but maybe not as much as what people would expect with a massive amount of new structures that we can expect to. Nuclear reactors next, breaking out a little bit, heading towards 150. Interesting, 150,000 ISK, 146,000 for the sellers, 130,500 for the buyers. Basically well above average. You can also see that the market is pretty empty. So nuclear reactors is definitely something that if it's in your power to produce that, you could definitely look to prioritize this, because you're getting a very nice price, just shy of a 1-year high, but definitely a really good one. Oxygen next, staying really high above 550, at least on the chart, mostly at 564 for the sellers, 500 for the buyers. So that margin is increasing, so any new supply is going to put lots of pressure on this price. I don't think we'll break above 600 anymore at this point. Robotics next, that one dipped to less than 100,000 ISK last week, and people are seeing that as a little bit of an opportunity basically to pick some of that up, because we're back above 100,000 ISK, 100,000 for the sellers, 98,000 for the buyers. We're playing with this price. I would say that this is probably around average for robotics, historically speaking. This could actually end up, of course, being a low price, considering inflation that does exist in the game. But overall here, robotics is basically on its average price point, with sellers just above 100,000, buyers just below that. So we could still go either way, I think. Rocket fuel next, holding at 12.5k, again also recovering a little bit from a slight dip, but nothing all too drastic. 13,000 for the sellers, 12,500 for the buyers. I would say we're just a touch above average on both. Self-harmonizing power cores, ooh, that's quite interesting. After dipping to less than 3 million, we're back above that. So demand is picking back up, maybe speculation as well. 3 million for the sellers, so that must be some fresh supply coming in. Yeah, exactly. So this must have been a little bit of speculation on this as well. People picking everything up below 3 million and then just relisting it above 3 million to try and make some profits, and then a couple of people coming in just below that, point wining each other. 3 million for the sellers, 3 million for the buyers. There's not much to say. The market is willing to keep these advanced PI materials above 3 million basically. Superconductors next, finally a little bit of pressure on these. It's actually turning into a little bit of a dive as well, heading for 12.5k or even less. 12.9 for the sellers, a bit above average. 11,800 for the buyers though, pretty wide margin. Buyers probably around average at this point already. And considering the rest of the chart, we might get back to average pretty soon for superconductors. Test cutters next, plateauing at a decent price point at the moment. 12,800 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. Decently wide margins, some decent supply coming in as well. So you don't really know how long this is gonna last, probably because it's related to the advanced PI materials. As a result here, I would say this is a prolonged sell opportunity. Don't waste it if you've been buying like myself over this period of time right here. Definitely take those profits after the extra demand for refineries is gonna die down. This will dive back down substantially as well. Wetware mainframes next. Oh, the one that's not being pumped back up to 75. So 2.8 million for the sellers, 2.6 million, a little bit above that for the buyers here. So if you want one that's a little bit cheaper than 3 million, that might get speculated above that, wetware mainframes are one to look at. Overall, I would say a bit of recoveries happening on both sides of the aisle here. Construction blocks went down, back up, back down a little bit. Consumer electronics basically holding steady. Coolants on that downtrend, so are reframed. So the fuel related stuff seems to be under pressure quite a little bit. Same with mechanical parts, but then here we've got nuclear reactors at a nice high point, test cultures as well. So that's definitely what's happening at the moment in the PI market in general. I would say ISK is flowing into the stuff that's related to the advanced PI materials, to the structures, and as a result a bit less ISK is flowing into the fuel related ones, and so all of that is under pressure a little bit. That does beg the question, of course, is it the right time to be buying stuff like this? Coolants, enriched uranium, you can see a pretty nice dive down, and we also have robotics here also playing with that low points that we've not seen in quite a while on the rest of the chart here. That's maybe the one speculation that you could risk to do. Fuels themselves are probably pretty low as well. Next up, we've got the Tech 1 chips at 3020. There we go. Let us start here with the Abaddon. That went up to 200 million in price a little bit, but giving back ground to 190. 193 for the sellers, 174 for the buyers here. Fresh supply, a little bit coming in here at 193. So this gap up to 200 million was plugged pretty quickly over the course of last week, and it's basically, I think, margins when it comes to the Abaddon here. At around 190, you're probably making a tiny profit on producing these, especially with the minerals going down at the moment. But that's always been the case here, that the bigger the ship, and in JITA and battleships are considered some of the bigger ships, of course, the slower it takes for the impact of the mineral market to come through. And so this is probably what's happening here. We're probably talking some Abaddons that are in production or were in production with the older mineral prices, and so I would say, as an industrialist, I would still calculate on what I've put into this specific ship, especially on a battleship, compared to the current prices, which, if you're making frigates for instance, is of course a completely different story, because you can make them so much more quickly in such bigger volumes. Next up here, we've got the Caracal. That one is dipping to less than 10 million ISK. It's 2 steps down from a battleship, and so here I think that the mineral market can show its impact much more quickly. So Caracals, 9.7 million for the sellers, 8.7 million for the buyers. Definitely breaking that 10 million mark is quite significant, and I think that here we are indeed talking about a very popular ship, lots of producers of these, and I think that's why we have this faster turnover, and as a result a much more swift impact of the lower mineral prices on this ship. Governor next, also diving back to 25 million, seeing a high point, probably I would say in preparations of maybe the resource wars, but probably also the moon mining. We know that these asteroids do spread out quite far, and so some barges might actually not be a bad idea if you don't want to risk too many rorquals and still have a decent yield on that. I think that stuff like the Governor might make sense. 26.7 million for the sellers, 24.5 for the buyers. Basically the sellers have been coming in with new Governors, driving the price down on the seller side, and the buyers, they haven't budged at less than 25 million ISK. Ferox next, also under pressure a little bit. It's a battle cruiser, so you're gonna need a little bit more time normally to see the impact of the mineral market on this one. But 48 million for the sellers, definitely down. 44 million for the buyers, so these are pretty cheap. Still we see decent supply coming in as well on the Ferox side, and we're heading towards that really low price point of 45 million, which if we reach that, I'm fully expecting again to see like a volume spike to drive the price back up when an alliance that uses Feroxes comes in and just picks up everything like below 50 million or something like that. It's highly possible. They already have a decent market for that at this point. Hurricane next, also coming under pressure here, another battle cruiser showing signs of stress with the low mineral prices, heading for that 45 million mark here, so look out for a buyout. Depends a little bit on the volumes, but 45.5 million for the sellers, 42.5 for the buyers, and here we are starting to see the lack of demand. A little bit surprising. Hurricane, pretty popular one when it comes to nullsec doctrines, I think, and with alpha clones getting access to that, this is something that that some nullsec groups might actually be looking for. One thing to note, of course, the volumes from 48 million to 45.5 million are not that big. Maybe they're waiting for a better opportunity to pick up more hurricanes, and at least some of them at an even lower price. And at the moment, it's definitely heading there. Maelstrom next, here again a battleship at 190, staying at a pretty high price point. I think that that's basically because no one is making those, and so the ones that are in rotation or coming to the market have been made with higher mineral costs, and as a result people aren't willing to just dump them and get those prices down. 192 for the sellers, 176 for the buyers. Expensive Maelstroms, relatively speaking, of course. Prophecy next, also you can see here at the tail end, under pressure a little bit, heading to less than 50 million. It's been a while since we've seen that on the Prophecy, but sellers have given in. 49.9 for the sellers, well, pretty much 50 million, but we're just below that, and 77 here, another 21 with decent volumes as well. 48 million for the buyers. I think that also, if you bought some Tech 1 ships and now you're seeing what's happening in the mineral market, you're probably wanting to get rid of as many of them as you can, and here we can clearly see the impact on the Prophecy. The site next, also under pressure once again, standard cruiser heading for well below 8 million, breaking that point. 8.2 for the sellers, 7.3 for the buyers. Quite interesting to see these average prices go below 8 million. Either a buyout has already happened at this point, or there are actually people still filling in these buy orders, although there's not that many of them at 7.3 million to create this average, which would be very bad news for the site market, to be honest. Next up here we've got the Typhoon, a little bit of a downward motion here to 140, very cheap, to be honest. 154 million for the sellers, 137 million for the buyers, and with these lower prices, this again is an indication that at least some people are just straight up selling Typhoon to these buy orders, which is a little crazy, but that must be what's happening. Volumes are abysmal as well, I think. What are we talking about here? Yeah, 10 to 20 a day, really not worth that much in the grand scheme of things. The battleship market is still doing really badly. And finally here we've got the Vexor, which is a cruiser, and at some point, oops, sorry about that boink, the cruiser market does respond decently quickly to the mineral market changes, and here we're just straight up heading to that 10 million after a slight high point for the Vexor. 11 million for the sellers, but 10 million for the buyers. And again here you can see quite a few ships coming in here. Maybe some people jumped a little bit too quickly on possible redesigns for alpha clones and things like that, so invest a little bit in these Tech 1 ships, and now seeing what's happening with the minerals, they're just dumping their stocks, causing the high points on some of these to basically end right now. Next up we've got the Tech 2 ships at 37.30. There we go. So here I am fully expecting not much to change, because it's just 10 days out until the moon mining changes come in, and that's really when we'll see how quickly people can respond and get everything up and running when it comes to the new way of producing Tech 2 materials, and thus also Tech 2 ships. The Ares holding at a really high price, 1 year high point, more than 35 million, 36.4 for the sellers, 32.5 for the buyers. This is definitely one I would say that if you have some that you still purchased from the good old days where you could pick up some Ares for 20 million, I would take the profit right now, to be honest. Next up here we've got the Claw. That one is in between the War Spike, but still at a pretty high point, well above 30 million as well. 34 for the sellers, 28.3 for the buyers here. A bit more margin, but still very expensive, of course, at the moment. The Crow next, 1 year high point up to well above 30 million again, 32.4 for the sellers, 29.3 for the buyers. So interceptors, the market at the moment is saying, you know what, more than 30 million for an interceptor, which again, nobody is gonna dump all their stocks if they're able to produce them, or if they have them lying around at this point, because who knows what's gonna happen with the moon mining changes. So for investors, yeah, the Tech 2 market, especially here in Jita, it's just not gonna be the time to buy. If you still have some stuff lying around, definitely look for those sell opportunities, of course. Here is the Aries holding above 50 million. It's a little bit under pressure in the last couple of days here, but it's really definitely not in a buy order territory just yet. 52.7 million for the sellers, 48.5 for the buyers. It's just very expensive. It's a lack of demand, I would say, in general, lack of interest in the ship that is causing the pullback in the price. Flycatcher next, also pulling back a little bit, but after reaching a 1 year high of more than 80 million ISK, down to 76.5, and the buyers are at 72. Just very, very expensive at the moment. Heretic next, same story, giving a bit of ground after reaching a 1 year high, 68.8 million for the sellers, 64 for the buyers. We reached more than 75 million ISK on a couple of days here about a week ago. Hounds next, this one is Del Bomber, and again reaching a 30 million ISK for the Tech 2 frigates, 32 for the sellers, 27.5 for the buyers. Very, very expensive historically speaking. Malediction reaching a 1 year high, close to 40 million ISK, so giving ground a little bit here is normal, but again sell price well above 30 million for these frigates, buyers even as well, 30.3 million for the Malediction. Very expensive stuff. Manticore next, doing a double spike up to 35 million ISK, so reaching pretty much the 1 year high again. 35.7 for the sellers, 29 million for the buyers. Very expensive still. Bombers. Nemesis is next. That one is actually surprisingly in between the two. So if you want to take the one gamble in Tech 2 ships at the moment, I would then look at the Nemesis, because it's completely out of line with the other Tech 2 frigates here. Still selling for 28 million ISK and about at 25.5 million ISK. This is what I would try to pick up then, to be honest. If you're looking for that Tech 2 gamble and you're thinking, you know what, most of the market is right, more than 30 million for a frigate is gonna be the name of the game, then the Nemesis is your one investment opportunity so far. Purifier also diving to less than 30 million all of a sudden, so it does show that it's not completely uniform. 29 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers here. It's again that gamble. Do you want to take it or not? That is the question that you have to ask yourself. But Nemesis and Purifier, two stealth bombers, Tech 2 frigates that you can still pick up for less than 30 million. All the others are above that so far. Next up here we've got the Saber, again at a high point, so having to give a little bit of ground, but staying at around 70. 71 million for the sellers, 64 million for the buyers, and sometimes someone is dumping some of them here. 149, that's a pretty significant number. So there you go, the Tech 2 market. I think it's basically going to be interesting to see what's going to happen once the moon mining is actually deployed. The one problem that you'll have here is that you won't really get up-to-date information. You have to understand moon mining is for nullsec and lowsec. That's where they'll make the materials, they'll grab all of that, they'll make their Tech 2 ships as well, and it needs to basically trickle down to the trade hubs from there before we will see the impact in EVE-Talk. But the impact itself is going to be noticeable already in nullsec, and that's where there might be this hesitation to actually drive stuff straight to the trade hubs right away. So expect a delay in the Tech 2 market when it comes to actually reading the impact of moon mining on that, whereas in nullsec you'll see an immediate impact on that one. I think that it's not gonna be very easy to follow everything from Jita itself, but interesting times for nullsec and lowsec for sure when it comes to the new moon mining mechanics, and the results here, yeah, basically very high Tech 2 ship prices at the moment. Let's move on to Tech 3 at 43.25. There we go. Let's take a look at what these guys are doing. So my expectation is that we're gonna start to see oversupply coming in until a big war is happening here. So here's the confessor holding at 47 million, and you've got 200 of them coming in here. So this should drive fresh supply below that, and this should put some pressure on the price. Buyers though, 44 million, very respectable. When it comes to confessor, remember that we could have bought these for like 29 and 30 million by the hundreds about half a year ago. So that is something to remember, but 200 of them coming in here is quite significant. Hecate next, also under pressure a little bit after getting back to close to 60 million, is currently well below 50, I would say. Yeah, 47 million for the sellers. Well, actually, again, here 52 to 47, it's only 39 of them. And 43 million for the buyers, still pretty damn decent. So here, first signs of oversupply, maybe. I mean, this is a decent number of them, but this can also be absorbed by just a couple of fleets in or some null actions. So I would say that the Hecate is primed to still have a little bit of volatility here. The confessor might just find a new high point at 47 million with this big number right here. The Jackdaw next, also under pressure a little bit in the last week or so. Selling for 44 million. Buyers, look at that, buyers below 40 million, and still 263 of them coming in as one of the latest orders. That is the pattern that you want to look out for. Occasionally this might be a good opportunity to buy, but then you would need to expect NOSC action pretty soon. So I would say that's for the insiders, if they know that some of the big groups are going to make moves around or right after the expansion. Then of course these jackdaws that make this big jump down here and the buyers at less than 40 million could be an indication of, okay, maybe I should buy a couple just in case that does happen in short order. But otherwise I would personally look at this pattern again of a serious cut down with a serious number of ships trying to drive this price back down, as a potential that oversupply will eventually take over. And finally, for the destroyers, we've got this Vapul, also under pressure a little bit at the tail end, playing with 40 million. Yep, 40 million for the sellers, and look at again here, 271 of them coming in, and 35 million for the buyers here. By far the cheapest buyers. Remember, 30 million, 29 million, that's what came on the seller side. But if the buyers come in range of that and you still see big numbers coming in on the supply side, yeah, start to look out for that pattern. If this keeps growing, then potentially we'll get to even lower prices for the tactical destroyers. One thing to keep in mind, of course, jackdaws and confessors, Hecates as well, very popular doctrines in Nullsec at the moment with the big group, so they might swoop in and buy hundreds of them all of a sudden. You will need to be on the money if you want to be able to buy some of the cheaper ones. Let's take a look at the cruisers next. Here is the Legion, basically flat below 150. That's interesting to see this stabilize a little bit. 150 million for the sellers, 133 for the buyers. Decently wide margin in my opinion here. Next up, we've got the Loki. That one is not stable. That one is actually shooting back up to more than 200 million. It's 220 million for the sellers, 190 million for the buyers. So if you're producing Tech 3 cruisers, I think it's a no-brainer that you're producing Lokis. Perhaps it's time to look at the volumes here as well. 100 on average, jump up to 200, so quite a few people came in to buy these. Legion, yeah, 50, 60 on average, 100 are the jump outs. So it's just basically the popularity of the Loki that is causing this increase in price right here. The Proteus just not popular. The volumes are like less than 40 on average here, under pressure at the tail end, and very cheap. 126 million for the sellers, 114 for the buyers. I'm a bit surprised by that. I would say that at some point you could try to create a Proteus doctrine for Nullsec as well that will counter at least something that's popular, but maybe it's just not happening with the current Proteus setup. So that one is really cheap. And then from the ticker you could also see that the Tenku had a nice little climb up towards 180. Not bad at all. 178 million for the sellers, 147 for the buyers here. And you don't really see, especially in the latest sell orders here, On this Proteus as well, that's decently small in numbers. Here's the Loki, decently small in numbers, and the Legion is one with 173, where that big supply is basically stabilizing the price. But the rest of them, nope, they're still pretty volatile week over week. You've got moves on either side that are pretty much trade worthy right there in some of these instances. It still remains a gamble, of course. The fact that you're seeing that oversupply start creeping in the destroyers is a little bit, makes this a bit risky. But for instance here, the Loki went down to less than 180. That would have been a really good buy, because right now you're selling them at a really good price here. So there is still some volatility in the cruisers. The Proteus is the big loser, and especially the Loki and the Tengu, we're still seeing some nice moves when it comes to those Tech 3 cruisers. And for the extra materials, advanced moon materials, of course, at 49.30. We have to keep a closer eye on these as we get close to the expansion, I would say. And then, of course, after the expansion, we'll still need to look at them, see what happens here. So it's reaction materials, advanced moon materials. Let's look at crystalline carbonite, 1 year high at 210 ISK. I mean, basically, we can just look at these charts, I think, and take a look at what's happening. Here, investors, people getting ready for what potentially could be a serious disruption of materials when the expansion hits here. Fermionic condensate, 1 year high, basically holding at the 1 year high price point. Fernite carbide climbing up to 200, again playing with that 1 year high here. So this is the market getting ready for what's happening. And our buy opportunity, again, July, which to me, I was looking for August, September, both here and in the PI market, but CCP again surprised me with the early deployment of what they're calling the winter expansion mid-October. That's not winter just yet, so they tricked us with the wording, with their words here, and as a result, I completely missed that trade. Your buy opportunity was July, both here and in some of the PI markets as well. So yeah, something to keep in mind here when it comes to future speculations on possible impacts of expansions. We're talking 1, 2, 3, almost 4 months ahead of time, where we're talking about a bottom. It's something to keep at the back of our mind for next time, of course. Ferrogel here jumping up to 60,000 ISK, 1 year high once again. Fullerite, the one that, well, we have to be honest here, going from 750 to almost 1500 ISK is doubling in price in September. That was apparently not sustainable. It's at 1000 ISK. If we disregard this one bubble, then we're still holding on at a really high price for Fullerites, even a 1 year high compared to anything that was happening before this. Hypersynaptic fibers, also maybe a little bit of over speculation up to 14k, but now settling at well above 12k, which is again a really high price, especially historically speaking, compared to the rest of the year. Nanotransistors, very similar situation at 6000 ISK, which is a tripling in the price of 1 year ago. Quite substantial. And again here, July, you've got this little dip here to less than 4000 ISK, which was your buy opportunity. Still a very good margin to have made, of course. Non-linear metamaterials working on its spike back up to the 1 year high. Yeah, there's just no good news here. Everyone at this point, advanced moon materials, extremely expensive. Your only hope is that this doesn't turn out to be that this turns out to be a little bit of a speculative bubble, and that moon mining will actually yield something close to previous numbers. Then all of this would crash down quite quickly, and people that are purchasing right now are then holding the bag. Phenolic composites, 1 year high, going from 1500 to almost 3000 ISK. Photonic metamaterials from 10,000 to 25,000. That was a little bit high, having to give some ground back to, but still well above 20,000 ISK. So again, really high prices, 1 year highs, except if maybe you disregard the run-up bubble a little bit. As I've been saying, if it turns out that moon mining is still plentiful, quite accessible, and that they can keep this market sustained, this will turn out to be a bubble. The opposite is possible as well. Of course, if major war breaks out and there's very strong disruptions in some of these activities, this could actually be a jump off point to go even higher. But personally, I wouldn't feel bad about missing any train that follows after this. It's really the July purchase again here that you can clearly see that we should have made. Plasmionic metamaterials, well, went up to 35k, so that was a little bit optimistic on these median daily prices here, 25,000 even on the 5-day moving averages. So, but we're settling at well above 20,000 ISK again, extremely high prices. Ceramic fibers, double spike up to 450, very close to the 1-year high again. Terahertz metamaterials, very similar situation, except that this one has been expensive throughout the last half year or so. But again, here the July dip was your one opportunity to purchase these at probably 16 to 17,000 ISK, currently selling for 22,000 ISK. Titanium carbide next, also again working its way back up at 250. Maybe the run up to 275 was a bit too much, a bit too quickly, but again here July, not a bad time to have purchased these. And then tungsten carbide, again 1-year high up to 250 from low points at 150 here in July. That's a very nice increase in price that we could have grabbed over 4 months. So that's the advanced moon materials, guys. They're all at their 1-year highs pretty much, except some of them after speculative bubbles in September have to give a little bit of ground, but they're still well above their averages. So I would say that it's too late to take your gambles in advanced moon materials. I certainly wouldn't anymore. And we'll have to wait and see now what the expansion is going to bring. Quick final note here in the quick bar. So construction blocks, grabbed a couple of those. We're waiting for even better prices, but I think I can make a little bit of profit on the few that I did grab. Liquid ozone is one of the investments that I made at this price point. I would of course prefer to see a price well above 100 ISK. We're just not there yet. I need some patience for that. And strontium is something that I've made a move on as well in the last few days on these prices, selling for 5,300 ISK, buyers at 5,100, 1-year low price. I think that for a longer term investment you could look into strontium. I have, that's the reason why it's in here. And then I'll have to look for it. You know that I also sold one. Let's take a look at that one if I can find it. Manufacturing materials, it is PI, so I know that is that. I think it's processed, no, refined then, yeah, but there's a lot of refines. Was it? Yeah, it was the water-cooled CPUs. There you go. So I think that I purchased these at like a 9,000 price range around here. Yeah, I think I purchased them here on this bottom point, and I sold them at a pretty decent profit, now that they're going for 11,100 ISK. So this is one investment that I had made a couple of months ago that was in the sidebar, and I sold it at a profit at this point. Just gonna give you guys that bit of extra information. I'll try to cover this as often as possible, but so know that I've just got a couple of construction blocks. I didn't manage to pick up anywhere close to the 100 million that I wanted to. But at this point I might just sell these off. We'll see. Maybe I'll hold on for a stronger price. Liquid ozone, I am invested in that at this bottom, definitely below 90. I'm not exactly sure of the price anymore, so we'll be waiting for a price well above 100 and then we'll be selling. And then strontium at the 1-year low, I am invested in that one as well. Again, something that I'll mention here at this point, because this is coming pretty close to advice. I don't actually give you advice, I just want to give you guys that information as well, since you are here for more market information. As a helicopter passes up above, don't put all your eggs in one basket, don't spend everything in here, and I don't have a crystal ball either. These are gambles that I am personally taking because I like the chart, and there is absolutely no guarantee that this will make you ISK, but I just want to give you guys a bit of an idea of what I'm doing in the market myself as well, with this extra little look at what I've got in the quick bar at the end there. For now, thank you very much for watching, guys. Kept it just under an hour, and I'll see you all next time.